I want to show you, if you know the techniques, you've got the tools to adapt your ingredients to the season, change to your tastes, and the technique is kind of the foundation. And so hopefully the recipes there being pretty basic, pretty generic recipes there, you can adapt, you can change, and you can use that as a foundation for your cooking adventures in the future. So I'll just go over what I was working on a little bit earlier. If you have a recipe for the pickled cucumbers, this is our 16th of an inch sliced cucumbers. I've added some salt to these cucumbers here. Salt is going to draw out water from the cucumber through osmosis. I don't know a whole lot about osmosis. But what I do know is that you sprinkle the salt on and the cucumbers get real wet. Then there's all this salty water in there. We're going to dump that out, and what that creates is a reverse osmotic pressure. So now these cucumbers are shriveled up and there's no juice in them. So when we add our pickling liquid, they'll suck it right up and you'll get a nicer flavor, a good crunch there. Rather than just dumping your pickling liquid right on a raw cucumber, we're going to prepare them in this way. So my sous chef here has got a 15-minute timer. we're 10 minutes out. So we want to let these go for about 15 minutes to really allow the vegetable to leak out all that water. You can do the same thing with zucchini and eggplant. You might have done that before in your kitchen to prepare those for cooking. When they're so filled with water and you desire maybe something crispy in a hot pan, that water is going to counteract the sear and that nice browning. So to salt or to dry essentially your vegetable a little bit in the beginning is going to help you out. That's your zucchini, your eggplant. That's going to be a big step there. So as these rest, I've got a pot of water boiling here. That is that's going to be for our blanched vegetables. We're going to talk about blanching versus poaching or boiling, why you would use one method over the other, and the benefits of that, and you know, how to execute that just right. So while the water is boiling, while the pickles are pickling over here, we're going to do a little bit of vegetable prep. So I've got these beautiful radishes. These are from Visser Farms. I got this great connection with the Vissers, and they've lined us up with this beautiful produce this morning. And I'm going to just prepare these for the salad that we're going to make at the end. The radishes here, just trimming the tops and the bottoms, getting ready for those to go on the slicer. And I'm going to take these tops, the nice tops here. Some of them are pretty ragged from being rubber banded or beat up in the crate, but you're going to find some real nice leaves here. These leaves are bitter. They're hot. It's tough to eat them by themselves. You can. But what this is going to do is this is going to complement our kale. Kale is rather bland in taste. It's related to cabbage. So is the radish. The cabbage, you think of what, you know, you look at these leaves and these cabbages are tough and hard, and you see these tender, beautiful little leaves from the radish, and they're soft and they look so delightful. But really, the big, hard, crunchy leaves, that's where there's really no flavor. They really need they need some assistance. These guys here are just going to serve to complement the rest of the salad. So I'm going to pick out just a small handful of some of these nice greens from the radish. We're going to set those aside and mix those into our kale salad. Kale is a beautiful thing. It grows readily and it's packed with nutrients. Vitamin K, oh man, I've got them all written down here. K, A, and C, iron, calcium, potassium. These things are great. Fiber, they last forever. They grow in the snow. A lot of folks will just go through and use a knife to remove this large rib here. I like to use my hands for just about everything if I can. So with just a light grip, I'm pulling down the stem from the thick side to the thin side, discarding those stems. You could pickle them if you were adventurous. You could gnaw on them if you needed something to clean out your teeth. They're pretty woody. And then what we're left with is this beautiful, nice green, not too tough. I got a piece here yet that I'll just remove. We got this beautiful kale that's ready to go. One thing I love about kale is that you can eat it raw, you can cook it, whatever you like. Today we're going to prepare this in a salad, and to prepare your kale in a salad, we're going to massage the kale. Anybody hear about massaging the kale before?
No.
people talk about this. It's a weird thing, like what, you're gonna do what to the kale? So it's tough, it's fibrous, it's woody, it's not a very pleasant thing to just pop in your mouth. So what we're gonna do is we're going to rub this between our hands. Don't be shy, tear it up. The color is going to change, and I'll show you here. We're breaking down the cellular structure of the kale, making it easier to eat, relieving it of some of its bitterness, some of that kind of, you know, some people are like, kale? We have to eat kale today? So what we have is a presentation here. The kale before it's been bruised, and then as you see here, it almost looks like it's been steamed. Some folks will steam their vegetables, their kale, before putting it into a salad. I don't have time for that. I don't want to eat a salad right now. I'm just going to get this going. So what we have here is our beautiful kale. It's been massaged. If our vinaigrette was ready, massaging it with a vinaigrette wouldn't be a bad idea, and I'm just going to let that sit. Unlike a romaine salad, an arugula salad, a mixed green salad that you want to eat immediately, this is a salad that you can dress, you can forget about it. Come back 25 minutes later and your salad will have improved. The kale will be tender. The kale will be almost marinated if you've dressed it. And so it's a great thing to get done early on, and then we can just let that wait as we move on to the rest of our vegetable cookery. So what we have here is some beets that I prepared earlier. These beets were poached, which means I put them in a pot with cold water, and then I turned on the heat. Not like a green bean, which I'd like to do here, in a pot of boiling water. Some folks put their green beans in a pot of cold water and turn it on. You can cook a bean that way. There's a lot of different ways to cook a bean. I prefer the blanching method, and if the wind dies down, I might actually boil this pot of water today. If not, we can just pretend. So last night I poached these delicious beets. I use salt and sugar in the water. So for example here, I have my pot of water. When you're cooking a vegetable in your pot of water, you notice at the end the water is green, or when you cook beets it's red. Where did that come from? That came from within the vegetable. And what does that water do? Not much. You throw it in the trash, you throw it down the drain. So there's got to be some sort of interaction between the water and the vegetable. Which means that if we're cooking in a plain, boring old tap water, we're not really imbuing any sort of extra flavor into the produce that we're cooking. Whether it's a potato, a carrot, a beet, whether you're going to do green beans, whether you're going to cook your pasta, the water is an important aspect of the cooking process. And we need to season the water. The water should be salty, salty like the ocean, some chefs will say. Don't be shy. Not all of that salt is going to get into your beans or into your beets, but you'll notice that the water will be a little, you'll say, maybe that's a little too salty. Maybe it is. It's probably not. You're ready to go. Oftentimes I'll go to the chefs in the kitchen, taste the water. We need more salt. In the case of root vegetables, they grow in deep in the soil. They've got a lot of natural sugar in them. We want to maintain that nice sweetness, the sweetness of a beet, the sweetness of a carrot. So we're going to add a bit of sugar to our water. And so I've added sugar and salt to the poaching liquid that I used to prepare these beets. I did not trim them before I cooked them. That would cause all of that beautiful red color to bleed out even more so. So I left the tops and the little skinny rat tails and all the skin on the beet. Once the beet has been properly cooked, I use this as a cake tester. It's just a metal cake tester. You can use a toothpick, slide it into the beet. Feels like it's cooked. Or, nope, it's not cooked at all. So using the cake tester, it was about an hour and a half, hour 45 minutes. I had to replenish the water because it had cooked all the way. Once the beets were done, I pulled them out and I rubbed them with a towel. The towel is just enough to remove the skins. They're very tender, they're very soft, and they just kind of slough right off as we use the towel. It's nice to do it while they're hot, before they're chilled. If you've got the chef's hands for it, you can kind of work with them as they're steaming, a couple pairs of towels, and get those skins right off. And then what you end up with is this beautiful glossy look to the outside of your beet. Rather than if you would have peeled it with a peeler, you'd have kind of these ugly angles. And as a chef, I'm always thinking about all of these goofy little things here. How's it going to look once I cook it? Is it beautiful? Is it pretty? It must. Say that again? About half of what I would do for the salt. So a good handful of salt in a pot of water, whether like maybe about a liter, good handful of salt. I've got a recommendation in there. And then about half as much of the sugar. And you can kind of play it by ear. After the water has come to a boil, after the sugar is dissolved, you can taste your water and you can say, I think this will impart a nice flavor. It's just a little sweet and a decent amount of salt to really make that vegetable very tasty. So now that these have been prepared in such a manner, they're ready to eat. I mean, they're just beautiful. They're so flavorful. I prepared a 3-2-2 pickling liquid. You've got a recipe in your little cards for this. You could do a 3-2-1. You could switch the ratios depending on your taste, but I find that a 3-2-2. Now this is a ratio, so you don't need a cup. You don't need a tablespoon. You could use your coffee cup. 2 coffee cups of sugar, 2 coffee cups of vinegar, 3 coffee cups of water, whatever you like. It doesn't matter, as long as the ratio stays the same. So I produced a whole lot of pickling liquid, and this stuff will keep for a long time. There's really nothing in it that's going to go bad. Weeks and weeks in your refrigerator. And this is what I'm going to use to pickle the beets. So the beets have been cooked and cooled. The pickling liquid is also cooled here. And I'm just going to cover the beets here. The pickling liquid could have been dumped on hot, and because the beets are cooked, that wouldn't adversely affect our pickle. I want to let these sit up for about a week before I get after them. So next week, we're good to go. I'll be here. So we've got our beets pickled. We've got a pot of water simmering. Maybe we can boil it that way. And our cucumbers have been salted. Thinking about, it's still burning, very slowly. Thinking about our mise en place, thinking about the order. In the kitchen we use a term called mise en place. Everything's in its right place. M-I-S-E-E-N-P-L-A-C-E, it's French. Things are in their place. My burner is here, my water is ready, my cutting board is nice and straight with my table. My knife is sharp. I have a Sharpie. I have a pencil. I have all of my tools, they're ready. Nothing worse than getting halfway through a project and really realizing that you haven't taken all the steps to prepare yourself. That doesn't make for a very enjoyable cooking experience. Running around the kitchen, washing your hands because you were just doing one thing that, here we are. So being prepared is so important. The cucumbers that I've sliced are now juicy. They're covered in their own water. Without spilling, I'm going to try to squeeze out some of that juice. So all that water was part of the cellular structure of the cucumber. It's gone now, and those cells are ready to be replenished. But instead of this flavorless cucumber water, I mean, it's probably not that flavorless. Put that in a cup and drink it. Wouldn't hurt. We're going to dump our same pickling liquid, the 3-2-2, right over the top. So to prepare the pickling liquid, you have a recipe there. The sugar and the water are boiled together until the sugar is dissolved, and then you add your vinegar, pull it from the heat, and it's ready to go. Cool and reserve. In the case of your beets, you could use the pickling liquid right away, right off of the stove, if you'd like. But for more tender vegetables, we want to make sure that they are, that the pickling liquid has been cooled. Same for these pickles here. We're going to wait a week. My goodness, so much waiting. So these are quick pickles. This doesn't involve any fermentation, and these pickles need to be consumed within a few weeks after they're produced. They will start to lose their color. They'll get kind of soft and funny. Honestly, after a few hours, they'd be lightly pickled, and you might be able to throw them on a sandwich, throw them in your salad, whatever. But without any sort of beneficial bacteria, which is what keeps a regular pickle alive, these will eventually spoil. If you're interested in the dark art of pickling or brining with salt, 2.5% by weight is the magic number. If you ever want to make sauerkraut, put a cabbage on a scale, figure out how much it weighs. Multiply that by 0.025. That number is how much salt you need to properly cure that cabbage. That's the number, that's the ratio of salt that keeps harmful bacteria from growing but promotes the good bacterial growth. You set your cabbage on the counter, covered in your percentage of salt. There it sits for a week, bubbling, stinking, scaring your relatives. And after that week's up, you'll notice that the bubbles might have slowed down a bit. It's ready to pull into your cooler, into your refrigerator, let it mellow for maybe a few days, and then get ready to go. That is all regulated by the FDA. You can go on their website. They'll show you all about that. I'm not allowed to do that in the kitchen without special permission from the health department. They don't want us rotting things on the table and then serving it to the public. I've got a pot of water. We'll just pretend it's boiling. I've got my beans, which I have cracked here. These are gonna be a side for our little kale salad here. When the water's at a rolling boil, we're gonna use our imaginations here. Water's at a rolling boil, then we will add our green beans and we'll let them go about 5 or 6 minutes until the beans are cooked to your liking. Green vegetables, all the same. If you had a desire to cook your kale, the boiling pot of water is a wonderful tool. Many days in the kitchen, I'll show up. First thing I do is put on a large pot of water to get going. When I blanch the vegetables, I like to have a very large pot so that when I add my cold produce, that the water remains at a boil. I want that very high heat, especially with green vegetables. I like that high heat to fix that green color. One thing that I do in the kitchen is prepare the vegetables in advance. Oftentimes you might have a party. You might be getting ready and you need to have a bunch of green beans ready. You can cook your beans in your pot of water, maybe 5 or 6 minutes, done to your liking. I like my beans a little softer. Let them go for your allotted time. Pull them out with a slotted spoon or a strainer or something like this. We would put them directly into a bucket of ice water. That is going to shock the green. It's going to keep the green from turning brown. Same thing is done when they make green tea. The tea is cooked to kill the green, to keep it from turning brown. Black tea, not the same. It oxidizes. Same would happen to your kale. You've had Granny's kale and she cooked it too long and it was brown and it didn't look very nice. But imagine a nice creamed kale that the vegetables were blanched properly and it's nice and brilliant and vibrant and green, and it's the same product, just a little change in your technique, and you'll be impressing the relatives. So here we go, imaginary boiling water. The green beans are in there. I've got salt in the water, salty like the ocean. Wouldn't want to swim in that. We've got a great lake here. It's a marvelous thing. Keeping the water moving around, making sure that your vegetables are completely covered, always a good thing. Back to the beets. A lot of water, not going to be a good idea. Remember, we talked about the water and the beet. There's some sort of interchange there. The beet's giving some of its flavor. The water is imparting some flavor with whatever we've added. So when you're cooking carrots, when you're cooking beets, when you have these poached vegetables, you want to use a small amount of water. Too much, you'll wash out all the flavor. Imagine one poor little carrot in a giant pot of water. All that flavor is just going to get sucked right up by the pot. So having a small pot is going to be beneficial. Like I said, the water of my beets had to be replenished. Keeping a lid on your poaching pot, on your boiling pot, is going to be beneficial to, you're not going to lose so much of that liquid. That nice, wonderful flavored cooking liquid, the liquor, is going to continue to impart its flavor on that vegetable as it goes, rather than just diffuse into gallons and gallons of water. Gallons and gallons. I work in a pretty big kitchen with pots about this. So we're going to let that go. That's going to take just a little bit longer. And we're going to make the vinaigrette to finish up our salad. And we're going to add some little beets on there, some of our pickled beets. We'll even, since I've got leftover pickling liquid, we might as well take one of these beautiful bulb onions from the farm. Cut it down the middle. We're going to add this to a small cup, put our pickling liquid on top, and we'll have a nice crunchy pickled onion. The onion can withstand a little bit of cooking, and so the hot pickling liquid wouldn't be a bad idea either. If I had my stove here, I'd have all this pickling liquid hot. 3 pots of water boil already. So there you go. Pickling liquid in 3-to-2 ratio. If the pickle's a little too strong for you, if you think the vinegar is a little too much, go 3-2-1 and do 1 part vinegar. Adjust your ratio. Write it in your notebook. And then remember for next time. Say, ah yes, the carrots were really good pickled with a lot of vinegar, but the beets, I liked them a little sweeter. Taking notes is very important. So let's get on to this vinaigrette. I have a shallot here that I've peeled. And a really nice technique is to leave the butt end, the end with the little sprouts coming off it. We're going to leave that attached to the onion, to the shallot. It'll work the same with a large onion, and I can show you that technique on there. Cut the shallot lengthwise with the butt end still attached. That's going to save my fingers when I'm trying to get a very nice dice on this very small shallot. I'll make a series of cuts horizontally and vertically, but not cutting all the way through. So what I have here is like a little fan almost, and all these little julienne bits that are ready to be sliced, all held together by that butt end. And again, saving my fingers. Bear claw, bear claw, bear claw. Don't cut your fingers. With my fingers curled back in such a way, worst that I could do is maybe nick a knuckle, which is easy to bandage. A fingertip? Not so much. When you have to work another 8 hours of your shift, you don't want to be cutting your finger. So I've got a shallot. I've minced it. That's going to be the, everybody all right? That's going to be the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to get the knife out, and we're going to do our knife work. Nice small dice. Nobody wants a huge chunk of onion in their vinaigrette. Maybe they do. Usually they don't. So we have our shallots. A little bit of honey. So a vinaigrette. How many times have you had a vinaigrette and you're left with a puddle of oil on your plate? It's oil and it's vinegar at the same time, but they're not emulsified. It's all right. But you know what? I think an emulsification, a nice emulsified dressing that's properly mixed, it looks really nice. The dressing has a more even coating over your lettuce, and it's really it just looks nicer. It feels nicer. So what is an emulsion? Where is my Dijon? What is an emulsion? An emulsion is oil and water. They don't want to mix. Two liquids that don't want to mix, but we want to make them mix. Mayonnaise is an emulsion. Hollandaise is a nice hot emulsion. A vinaigrette, when properly made, can be emulsified, but it's a rather unstable emulsion. Oftentimes your dressing, it'll eventually separate. That's totally natural. But what we're going to do here is try to coax our oil and our vinegar into becoming emulsified, homogeneous. So we will suspend we're going to suspend our water in oil. The water in this case is the vinegar. So I've added about 2 teaspoons of honey. I'll add maybe about a tablespoon of, in this case, sherry vinegar. Sherry vinegar from Spain. It's a wonderful flavor. I really like it on a salad. So we've added about a tablespoon or so of our sherry vinegar. I've got some honey, and we'll put some Dijon in there as well. The Dijon and the honey are going to help to act as an emulsifying agent in our vinaigrette. With just oil and vinegar, you might be able to shake it and shake it and shake it, and it'll come together for 20 seconds, and then it'll start to fizzle out. So that process, that's the agitation. That's suspending the liquid in the oil. You're making tiny little particles, all these little bubbles, right? All these little bubbles of the water, and they're going to be suspended, hanging there, little bubbles floating around in the oil. Eventually they'll find each other, and because oil wants to mix together and water wants to mix together, you'll have a big split. So the agitation, the mechanical agitation, that's what I'm going to do with the whisk. If you really want a strong emulsion, I would suggest doing this in a blender. Have your blender and have your wet ingredients and whatever in there. You could bypass the chopping of the shallot. Just chuck a shallot in there, put your vinegar in, a little honey. We're going to do some salt and pepper. Any herbs that you would like. Have fun with it. The ultimate ratio is going to be 3 to 1. 3 parts oil to 1 part everything else. So again, this is a ratio that you don't need a cup. You don't need, you can eyeball it if you want, and you can change it up. I like to use a blend oil. This is a vegetable oil and olive oil blend. Oftentimes olive oil can be a little sharp, a little strong, and I like to mix that with just a plain neutral flavored oil. Grapeseed oil is really nice. It's another neutral oil, very, very delicately flavored. But if you like a strong flavored vinaigrette, just straight olive oil or extra virgin olive oil will do. So with the whisk, we will slowly begin to drizzle in the oil. Slowly. The first stages of the emulsion are the most important. Whisking all the while. I don't know if you can all see the thin little stream that I have here. And I'm just going to mix this in a ratio of 3 to 1. As the emulsion forms, the vinaigrette will form and become thicker than just oil and water. That's a good sign. Without the Dijon, which is a great emulsifier, without an egg yolk or something really powerful to emulsify your vinaigrette, you'll have a tough time getting it to stick. If too much oil is added, there is no possible way that the vinegar would be able to hold all the oil, and it will split. What we'll say it breaks, it splits, and then you've got a big puddle. So what I have here is the vinaigrette is thickened due to the emulsion. Creepy baby spoon to the rescue. Wonderful. Sweet from the honey, shallot giving it some nice flavor, salt and pepper there, marvelous. A little more vinaigrette than the greens that I've prepared, so I'm going to go through, just get a few more ready. Our greens have been sitting here kind of marinating and softening. Dressing the salad. Go to sit down at the table, it's Thanksgiving, pass the ranch, squeeze a little on the top, that's okay. But if you really want to enjoy a salad on a nice hot summer day, and you're just, if you really want to truly enjoy it, you should dress your salad. Get it in the bowl, toss it around with the vinaigrette, making sure that all of the greens have been coated. It's important to evenly distribute the greens or the dressing there. You get 1 bite of plain raw kale. I love kale, but that's not all that exciting. So I've got our dressed salad here. I'm going to throw in a few more of these beautiful radish tops. And I know what I'm having for lunch. Here's the base of our salad. I'll show you this fun tool. This is a mandolin. If you don't have one, I would really suggest getting your hands on one. It's a wonderful tool if you desire consistency, thin sliced anything. If you want to cut your fingers, it's also a really nice thing to have around. It even says on here, watch your fingers. It's essentially a plane with a fixed blade, and you get nice even cuts of any sort of vegetable. And if you want to really have an impressive look, the mandolin is the way to go. Even a guy like me with decent knife skills wouldn't be able to produce beautiful radishes like that so quickly. So we got a little radish on there. We're going to take our pickling liquid. You think my beans are done yet? No. Hard as a rock. Some of our pickled onions. They'll be very lightly pickled at this point. Some of the delightful little cucumbers. How nice do those look? Just put that in a sandwich. Fried chicken sandwich. Some mayonnaise, some pickle, mustard. I forgot the mustard. And the chicken sandwich. I like to maybe add just a little bit of crunch, some texture here, some toasted almonds maybe. Voila. One last blast of color. We'll take our pickled beets, maybe just one or two, and we'll slice those up, throw them on the salad. Does anybody here like beets? What was the first way that you ever had a beet? Pickled. Or like out of the can, yeah. Grandma comes up with the pickled beets and it's like, oh wow, it's not bad when you put a bunch of sugar on it. That was the first way that I really enjoyed a beet. Another way that I like to eat them is roasted. Roasted in their skins, in the oven, on a bed of salt. So we're talking about that osmosis. We're talking about this, this process. An old French technique would be to take your beets, or let's say your potatoes, and just set them on a tray of salt as they bake. You're gonna, if you like to do a baked potato or a mashed potato from baked, that's a really fantastic way to season them as you're cooking them. Beans still aren't done. So what we have here is a beautiful kale salad. We've used a number of pickles on here. We've used a couple different techniques. We've massaged the kale. We pickled the cucumbers. The beets were pickled with the same liquid, and I've got some onions on there as well. All the same stuff. I'll have this in my refrigerator, and as I'm going through my day, and I prepped up a bunch of radishes. Oh, I've got too many radishes. What am I going to do? Go to the cupboard or go to my refrigerator, pull out the pickling liquid, throw a little on there. Maybe today we'll throw some aromatics in there. Maybe we'll take the pickle just away from being a boring little thing, and we'll add some aromatics. Chili flake, whole peppercorns, bay leaves. These are pretty typical aromatics that you would see in a pickle. Allspice, I mean, you get down to the bottom of a jar of pickles and there's a big allspice and sometimes coriander. Let your imagination run wild when it comes to these pickles. You really can't do it wrong. I think that's about it for what I have to say, but I'd really like to open it up to questions, and maybe there's something on your recipe cards that you'd like some explanation on. Yeah. I love rice vinegar. I love a rice wine vinegar. I love it because it's got a very neutral flavor. It has the acidity that you want. It's oftentimes a little bit sweet, but it isn't so strong like apple cider vinegar or the sherry vinegar. So most of the time when I use my pickles here is the rice wine vinegar. Now if I'm making a red onion, pickled red onions like we have at the restaurant, I'll use a red wine vinegar, and then you get a nice beautiful red color. Depending on what you like. Apple cider vinegar is great. I like to use it, but I prefer my apple cider vinegar in a dressing rather than in a pickle. It's pretty abrasive. It's got a strong taste. It's a nice question. Anybody else? It's a beautiful day. Yeah, go ahead.
It looks like you could add salt and pepper after, like on the salad.
No, I would add it in as I'm tossing the salad there. I heard something one time. They said, vote early, vote often. Same thing goes with your seasoning. Season early, season often. As you're cooking, when we cook the beans, the salt's in the water there. When it comes out, we'll taste them, and we might add just a touch more. But if you've seasoned early in the process, then you don't have this uneven. So you imagine like maybe you've got your salad cooked, you sprinkle a little salt, you've got a couple nice salty bites, you can mix it around, or it's been adequately seasoned throughout. Sometimes that additional salt is really nice, and I like to use sea salt in my cooking. A lot of folks will use kosher salt. Sea salt has more of a mineral compound to it. It's going to give back a little more nuance to your food. I mean, vegetables are filled with vitamins, minerals. They've got these wonderful flavors. And if you use kosher salt or iodized salt, they taste like salt. They taste like, they make things salty. But a sea salt is going to have a a little bit of a nicer, maybe a softer flavor. There's a lot of different types that you can use. Maldon is a really great salt from Europe. I like just Mediterranean sea salt that you can buy. It's always good though to have different salts in your repertoire. A coarse salt to finish. So that kind of goes against what we talked about seasoning early. Let's say you have a steak or you've got some French fries or something and you want that salty crunch. Then seasoning just at the end before it's going to go out. You're going to have that bite with this kind of a salty explosion that's going to be really nice rather than evenly dispersed throughout. So I would use a coarser salt for a finishing salt and a finer salt like my sea salt as something to use in the blanch pot to use early. That's really nice. Yeah, go ahead.
You don't steam vegetables very often, then. You're usually cooking them in water.
Exactly. I've used a bamboo steamer, and that's a really nice way to steam your produce. You can use a basket on top. I've got a device at home that'll sit on the top here. I find that steaming vegetables is good for the vegetables that need to be cooked a little bit longer. Kale does just fine in a rapidly boiling water, and that's only going to take maybe 2 or 3 minutes to get that in and out. You really don't have to cook it very long to make it tender and to make it very flavorful. Particularly with kale, if it's cooked briefly, it tastes really nice and delicate. If it's cooked for too long, then you get that awful stinky brown kale that's maybe what you thought of when you first came to the market and you're like, kale? That again? Yeah, a steamer basket is a fabulous way to cook your produce. Between poaching and blanching, that usually takes care of just about everything. But the steamer is also a fantastic way. One thing I find with the steamer, it can be difficult to impart flavor. So I got a clever idea. I steamed some cabbage recently, in the fall when we had some nice cabbage, and I added a good handful of caraway seeds right into the water. And so this steam coming up just like smelled like rye bread. It was marvelous. And that really imparted a really nice flavor there into the cabbage. So, you know, you can get creative with, you know, adding different flavors here or there, changing your technique, or, you know, keeping one technique and then changing your ingredients. It's just good to have like a baseline knowledge of, you know, how are we going to prepare these things. It's wonderful.
Now, you mentioned roasting on a bed of salt.
Yeah,
Salt.
yeah. So there's a traditional French recipe for gnocchi, which is a little dumpling made with potato and flour and a little bit of starch. And it's a very, very soft dough. And it's very important in that recipe that your potatoes are very, very dry. So you wouldn't boil your potatoes, you'd bake them. And one of the famous chefs in America, his name is Thomas Keller. His restaurant in Napa is the French Laundry. And so he's trained classically in French, and so this is probably an old French technique. But let's say this is my roasting pan here. I would take a whole box of cheap salt, maybe kosher salt, something relatively inexpensive, and I would pour that down in a bed, maybe about 1 inch of salt there. And I'd nestle all my potatoes right in that bed of salt. And then I'd throw the whole thing in the oven, just like so. After they have come out, again, osmosis is happening, so there's an exchange of flavors going on, and the potato becomes seasoned, but you'd be surprised it's not overly salted. There's recipes to take an entire fish and bake it in a crust of salt. If you've had a prime rib, oftentimes there's a salt crust added, and as long as you're not consuming all of that salt, it's only just adding just that right amount. So once your potatoes come out of the oven, you peel them open and they're flavorful and they're roasted, they're very tender, but they're not soggy. And that would be that would not help out your gnocchis. You need nice dry potatoes, your flour. And that's another really simple recipe. You can just kind of wing it in a bowl. Take your mashed potatoes that have been cooked, add a little bit of flour, an egg or two, mix it together until you have something that looks a little bit like a dough, add a little more cornstarch or flour, roll it out and throw it in a pot of boiling water, and it cooks up like a tender dumpling. And then after you're done and you say, oh, it's a little mushy, well, then next time, you know, a little more flour. You could also look at the recipe. Thomas Keller's recipe is pretty fantastic. He's got all the know-how. He's like one of the greater chefs in the United States. So he's
What's the restaurant
The restaurant is the French Laundry in Napa. He's got another one called Ad Hoc, and he's maybe has another one. Ad Hoc is more of a bistro style. The French Laundry is very classic.
But of course, that would work with other vegetables too.
Yeah, absolutely. The French Laundry has their own garden, so they've got plots and plots of land. They have a specific gardener who works closely with the chef, and they produce menus based on what's available in the season. That's a really exciting part about my job, is being able to come down to the farmers market, make relationships with the farmers, say, hey, what's good? They'll say, oh man, you got to try this. It just came out. These green beans were just harvested 2 days ago. They're the first of the season. If you get out there, the beans should still be out. There are new potatoes out. So we went out to the farm, me and some of the line cooks, and we went around and we're digging around in the dirt and getting excited. Look, carrots are here, finally. We're done with the carrots from last fall. And that relationship, I think, is really important for a chef. It's also really important for the consumer too, to know that, that there's some sort of continuity here. You guys can come to the farmers market because you like the fresh produce. You like to talk with the farmers. So do I. I like to get down here and, make friends. Friends all down the way here, doing special things for me, or, like, hey, we've got some really great honey this time of year. We've got some X, Y, or Z. It's just a really great place to be, coming down to the farmers market, finding a little bit of shade. Yeah, I think that's about it for me. Are there any other questions? Go ahead, in the back. It does come with a guard. No, of course not. My mother would have something to say about that. Yeah, they come with a little plastic guard here, little spikes. Yeah, for real. This will go right through a fingernail too. I've done it. Yeah, this is a Ben Rinner. You can get these on Amazon. It's about 20 bucks. It's a really fantastic tool. Imagine how long it takes to slice up a cabbage for like a braised cabbage or your sauerkraut or something like that. This is a great tool. They make one that's extra wide too. Put your cabbage on there. Remember, 2.5%. It's the magical number for your pickled, your fermented stuff. 2.5% salt by weight. Weigh your cabbage. Kimchi is a hip thing right now. Fermented cabbage with like chilies and garlic and fish sauce and stinky things, and it's a lot of fun. And so you get this weird living thing sitting on the counter, and it's fermenting and bubbling, and once it's all done, you get this wonderful acidic crunch. It's a great thing. 2.5%. That's the magic number. So that's your regular pickles, sauerkraut. You could pickle anything. Pickled radishes are really nice. Fermented radishes, I really like those. You had another question?
Yeah. What is your favorite way to cook the new carrots?
The young carrots? Oh, very, very lightly. Preferably raw, but I'll just lightly scrub a new carrot. So the question was, what do you do with the new carrots, the young carrots? With a towel, not with a peeler. Wipe them or scrub them. If you have a green Brillo pad or something that's not dirty, that's a good one as well. A lot of the nutrients of the carrot is right next to the skin. And so when you have very narrow carrots, it's a really nice thing to have. You put your peeler on it and you're left with a toothpick, and that's no fun for anybody. So I'll take them and I'll just very lightly clean them. And then in a pot of water with just enough water to cover, and then sugar and salt, I'll simmer them. I'll bring them to the boil, and then I'll just let it simmer until they're the tenderness that I like. And then I'll produce a glaze. I'll remove most of the cooking liquid, except maybe a few tablespoons. So the carrots are in the pot with a little bit of the cooking liquid yet. Just a few, like maybe a tablespoon or two, depending on how many carrots you have in the pot. Let's say you're cooking for two tablespoons. Return the pot to the heat. The carrots are cooked how you like them. They're still nice and whole in their skins, maybe even with a little bit of the green top, so you really just have all that beautiful nutrient value there. After most of the liquid is gone and you've got your few tablespoons, you'll add a few nubs of butter, maybe 2 or 3 tablespoons, and you'll have it on the heat. And you'll create another emulsion called a glaze. And the emulsion in this case is the cooking liquid, this beautiful seasoned carrot water, and then the butter. The agitation is created by maybe shaking the pan or just the act of the boiling of the liquids together. Butter has a lot of water in it already, and what you'll see is it'll go from something that looks rather greasy to it starts to bubble, and the bubbles become thicker, and it looks like a lacquer, like a glaze. And you'll roll the carrots around in the pan, and you'll see that the glaze just veils them. It just coats them so beautifully. What's really nice about that is that it will want to cling as the emulsion here thickened up and tightened up, like a mayonnaise or a hollandaise or an emulsified sauce. So will your glaze, which will be the perfect vessel to evenly distribute your seasoning. So if you have hot carrots in a pot with no water and you just throw on some butter, you've got greasy carrots in about 2 minutes. And you put some salt on there, and the salt mixes with the butter, and the butter just drips down to the bottom of the pan, and you get down to the bottom of your bowl and you're like, oh, here's a pound of melted butter, Grandma. With a glaze, if you've created that emulsion, it'll become stable and it'll just cling to the vegetable. So a glazed carrot is my absolute favorite way to eat a new carrot, and cooked all the way through. People have a tendency to like a lot of crunch in their vegetables, but for me, a green bean or a carrot that is soft enough to cut with your butter knife, it's a wonderful thing. A little bit of crunch in your broccoli and your asparagus. Sometimes, you know, your green beans, if you're gonna make a salad, is really nice, but I like a properly cooked vegetable. And a carrot too just gets that magnificent sweetness. So it's a wonderful thing. It's a good question. Yes, absolutely. And honey works as a great emulsifier. Exactly. Exactly. And you get that beautiful sheen. They shine. They're like beautiful. And so you have them laid out. And if you want to be really impressive, all your carrots are, you know, facing the same way in your dish, and you have a few little sprigs of the tops of the carrots. It's great. The farmers market's a great place to be, even when it's 90 degrees. Thank you all so much for coming out. I really appreciate it. If you guys have any other questions or comments or whatever, you can find me at Butch's Dry Dock every day of the week except Monday. We're open Mondays, but I'm just not there.